I welcome you to Exploitation. This is using gathered information to gain access. We've been moving from reconnaissance and scanning in the previous videos to the next conceptual phase, using what we learned to understand how attackers gain access. This is what we have done so far. So far, we've been using our Linux toolkit. We've discovered hosts, learned what is about open ports, scan open ports, check the services that are running on open ports, and even script, then running services and check for known weaknesses. We've been able to identify the target using Kali Linux and other tools in Kali Linux. We have scanned for port and services. We have performed vulnerability checks. Now, why did we do that? Reconnaissance gives us the puzzle places. Exploitation is assembling them into access. That reconnaissance isn't the end. It gives us a clue we can combine to actually reach the target. That's the goal of exploitation. Example target overview. Imagine a Windows 10 host that hasn't been updated for years, with several open ports and at least one service known to be vulnerable. These are the facts we will exploit. Windows 10 machine outdated or that has not been updated for years or several months. Again, several open ports and one filtered port, one service with a known vulnerability. Extracting useful facts. From our many findings, the most useful item are the outdated OS and a vulnerable service. Those are what we will turn into an attack path. That is outdated OS, higher chances of flaws, and vulnerable services attack vector. When we say exploiting a target, what do we mean? Exploiting a target is like using a discovered weakness to carry out an attack that was not intended by the system owner, often to gain some level of access or control. This is what we mean. A system owner might not be aware of a weakness in his or her system. So exploitation will enable us to discover that weakness. And once we discover that weakness, then we can take advantage of that weakness and gain level and control that system. Exploitation is a technical art that takes advantage of flaws. Yes, when there is a flaw in the system, that system can be exploited. In ethical context, skilled testers attempt controlled exploitation to confirm vulnerabilities and measure risk only with appropriate permission. This definition clarifies the distinction between malicious exploitation and authorized security testing. Malicious exploitation does not involve two parties. It's only the attacker looking for weakness in a system. And the authorized security testing is when a system owner invites an ethical hacker to carry out tests to check if his or her system is vulnerable. So high level explanation, no technical steps. The high level: identify a weakness, evaluate impact, demonstrate access in a safe lab, report and remediate. 1. Discover weakness. 2. Validate impact. 3. Document findings. And 4. Remediate issues or fix your findings. Emphasize the responsibility lifecycle: discovery, control, validation, documenting findings, and remediation. Avoid giving details on how to perform the exploit itself. This approach ensures that security testing remains ethical and focused on improving defenses. The attack concept. The basic flow: exploit a flaw. You check for a flaw in a system, and when you see one, you exploit it. Then you go ahead to deliver a payload. We shall talk about the payload, and then use that payload to control that system. It is as simple as that. Exploit the vulnerability, deliver a payload, and gain control to that system. It's as straightforward as that. Now, what is a payload? A payload is just a software we send to the target. In most cases, it gives us a shell. And what is a shell? A way to execute commands remotely and inspect the file system. So before a hacker can monitor another target, the hacker must first send a payload to the target system, and upon successfully planting the payload on the target system, the attacker will now be able to execute commands remotely, and that is made possible by the payload that was deposited or sent to the target system. A payload is a small program delivered to the target. It usually provides a command shell or remote control. Then it lets us run commands and browse files. This is the reason why an attacker in Germany can be controlling a system in Canada. That is the work of payload. So how it works? So once the payload runs on the victim system, it typically calls back to our machine, which is the machine of the attacker. From there, the attacker will issue commands as if the attacker were using the target terminal. So number one, exploit the bug to place the payload. That is the first step. Then second, the payload executes on the target system. Then the third step, the payload connects back to the hacker's machine or to the machine of whoever sends the payload. And then the attacker issues commands and receives output. Is as simple as this. You pick up a phone, you call someone could be outside your country where you reside, and if the call goes through, the receiver is going to answer hello, and the caller will then begin to dish out whatever information he or she wants to pass across to the receiver. The hello said by the receiver can be regarded as a payload when it comes to ethical hacking. Without the hello, the caller might not know that the call has successfully connected to the receiver. So the hello is a confirmation that the call actually got to the receiver. And if the receiver says hello, the caller now begins to drop whatever he wants to say to the receiver. So that is the analogy of a payload. Now we have multiple target problem. Not every target behaves the same. Some are vulnerable, others are not. And those that are not, they have been patched, because when you discover a weakness on a system, the next thing is to patch it so that no one will have access to that system. So different targets need different approach. Vulnerability based versus social engineering. These are two methods of sending a payload across to a target. If a vulnerability exists, that is, if the target has a known flaw, the attacker is going to exploit it directly and deliver the payload so it runs without the user's involvement. If no vulnerability exists, as in if the system has been patched, what happens? So when a system is up to date and patched, the attacker can't rely on remote exploit. Instead, the attacker uses what we call social engineering to persuade someone to execute the payload. So when exploits aren't possible, we trick the user by using social engineering to get them to run the payload. We're going to see how a user can run the payload without actually knowing. These are social engineering examples. Common tricks include sending a seamless, harmless file via email or spoofing a known contact. Physical method like USB drops a possible but risky malicious attachment disguised as an image or document. What this is saying is that a payload can be dropped using a USB drive, and the content of that USB drive will be seen as an image or document. Alright, move ahead. So spoofed sender address to appear trustworthy. Physical delivery, e.g. USB, high risk, rarely used. The reason why it is rarely used is because most people are not aware of payloads. Example, when you are contacted by a scammer on your WhatsApp and he proposes a mouth-watering offer to you and he says, I'm going to send you my document. The moment you download that document, you have executed the payload, and the attacker can then begin to monitor your system from wherever it is in the world. So to be on the safe side, mind what you download, be it image or file from the internet. If you receive a malicious file or image, what happens when you open it? If the victim opens the disguised file, the payload can execute in the background and establish remote access, all without the receiver noticing. So that is because payloads run silently, connect back to the attacker, then the attacker gains access control without user awareness. Tools that help. Penetration testing frameworks provide pre-built exploits and payloads. We will learn how to use these tools safely and responsibly. So frameworks like Metasploit contains many exploits and payloads ready to use. We're going to see how to use all these tools. So in the next video, we'll dive deeper how exploitation actually works internally, the payload types you will meet, hands-on exercises with Metasploit. Number 1, detailed walkthrough of exploitation mechanics. 2, types of payload and when to use each. And 3, hands-on with Metasploit. We're going to see how to work with Metasploit and more coming in our next videos. So key takeaway from this video: remember, exploitation is applying what we learn. If a vulnerability exists, we exploit it. If not, we may need to persuade a user to enable us carry out and deposit the payload themselves. Both parts aim to create a connection we can control. So if we can deliver the payload directly, fine. If we involve someone to deliver it, it's also fine. But in both, we are looking for a connection back to the hacker. Exploitation turns information into access, either via a vulnerability or via social engineering. So these are the two ways by which we can move or transfer a payload from the attacker to the target. That is all for this video, and I'll see you on the next one.